Welcome to Woodcraft Revival, where we talk about all things wood. High winds can prove to be catastrophic for your woodlot. So is there any way to protect your trees from high wind? Well, let's get into that. So even though our 100 acres here is nestled down in a valley and the wind is buffeted by the ridge, we still have issues with wind causing tree damage. In fact, this time of year it's kind of easy to spot all the downed trees because they're the ones that still have snow on them right now. And while there isn't an obvious guarantee on how to keep your trees from getting damaged from wind, here's a tip I want to share with you that I think will prove helpful in mitigating the amount of tree damage you have from high winds. So why do high winds take out some trees and not others? Like here we have 2 Virginia pines. This one's still standing, this one is not. Well, there's some obvious answers that are obviously beyond our control as woodlot managers, and that could be just bad root system, diseased tree where the roots are dying, the place where the tree actually took root. It could be too shallow or have a rock face. Like our big red oak that blew over down by our driveway, it simply just ran out of root room because of the rock face it was growing against. So there's a lot of things like that we just can't control. However, there is one culprit that we can identify and take it head on. That culprit is the climbing vine. And here in our hardwood forest in central Appalachia, we have 2 real big bad boys that cause a lot of issues. The grapevine and the poison ivy / poison oak. So how are these vines, when they pale in size comparison to a tree, responsible for destroying trees during high wind? Well, it's basic physics, and I'll show you. So if we were to look at an example of a healthy, vibrant tree, it, of course, has a healthy root system, a good, solid, stable trunk, and then a broad spreading canopy. Now, when you have high winds, that canopy, of course, is rocked back and forth in the winds, pitched quite a bit. If you've ever been in the woods during a windstorm, you see just how far these trees can move. Well, the fulcrum on that movement is, of course, the base of the trunk, the root, and the root ball. Arborists report the more a tree moves in high winds and survives, the stronger its root system gets, because that fulcrum down around the base pivots back and forth and causes gaps in the ground where the roots are, allowing the taproot and the capillary roots to grow broader, stronger, and deeper. When a tree has a vine growing in it, then a lot of times that fulcrum is disadvantaged, or there's a double fulcrum that has to be dealt with. The vine, since it's so entangled in the tree's canopy, but then is also attached to the ground at a different location, can offset the natural physics of that tree rocking back and forth and cause tension to be in a certain spot and maybe break the canopy out of the tree. Here's a great example where this massive grapevine is anchored right at near the base of the tree and is twisted around the trunk. So as that tree is manipulated by the wind, it doesn't have the freedom to simply rock back and forth with this. Imagine it's like a chain or a rope wrapped around it. It's going to cause it to twist in certain directions. It may inhibit the swing this direction, which would be south facing. It can inhibit the swing that way so much that it causes something to give. In fact, I would bet, since this grapevine is loose and whacking around, it's probably what caused some of the bark to wear here. The grapevine has smacked around in heavy winds and actually damaged the bark. Grapevine is also notorious for hopping from tree to tree when trees are close by. It can spread over into the other canopy. So see, we have a grapevine here that has started with this larger poplar and is wrapped around its canopy, but it also has a branch that's moved over to this poplar and is wrapped around its canopy. So just imagine when those things are trying to move independently in the wind, but they're lashed together, that's going to cause all kinds of structural tension in certain areas of the tree. Now, the poison vines, like poison ivy or poison oak, are a little different than grapevine in that they attach. They've got all these little holdfasts that attach to the bark of the tree. So they are stuck to the tree, whereas the grapevine can kind of swing out loose. Both situations can prove problematic for the tree. In a situation with this poison ivy vine gripping this really nice lumber grade poplar, imagine wearing a splint on your arm or on your leg, and if you want to freely move your arm, but you can't because there's this extra rigid portion attached to it, it decreases range of motion. So again, in a high wind event where you want that canopy to be able to flex, poison ivy is going to keep that from flexing as much and may cause it to break off lower on the tree. So we've identified the problem, but you may be asking, well, Troy, what's the solution? Well, the solution is actually quite simple, but it's extremely labor intensive. My solution offers the opportunity to kill the vine without injuring the tree. And the tools you simply need to do this is a saw of some sort and maybe even a small hatchet. We're going to take both and we're going to walk around and do some manual relief. So in the distance I just walked in shooting this first portion of the video has only been maybe not even 100 yards. You can see over there where the snow line coming down is, that's that Virginia pine that we started with that had uprooted. So from there to here, where you guys are standing with me, is really a nice stand of poplar. There is a lot of marketable timber in here, timber that I would like to use on the sawmill projects that we're doing. So those are the things I want to protect first and foremost. But looking around, there's got to be multiple hundred vines that I have to deal with. Some trees could have 3 or 4 vines on them. So it is very labor intensive, but we're going to get to work. I'm going to take you guys with me here, and we're going to just work this area a little bit along the roads, specifically looking for my best value trees. This is a good time of year to do this because during dormancy, if you're allergic to poison ivy, you have a less likely chance of getting it. Now, I will bet my lunch money that I will still end up with a little bit of poison ivy today because that's how allergic I am to it. But it's just a little bit easier to spot and do the work when the canopy's not in. And who doesn't like a good walk in the woods when there's not a lot of bugs and heat? So I've taken my DeWalt saw, put a little strap on it so I can carry it easier and bring you guys with me. And then just my hatchet. And I'll show you why I'm carrying both tools here in a second. So let's go for a hike. So let's start here with these 2 poplars. This guy obviously is juvenile, not big enough to be marketable, but that poison ivy vine is massive. This poison ivy vine is gargantuan. And this is a really nice poplar. A lot of marketable timber in this, but it has 1, 2, 3 decent sized poison ivy vines. And they are growing all around the base here and really restricting the movement of the tree, fighting for nutrients, all that kind of stuff. And not to mention just how much it's choking out the canopy. Now, one neat thing about poison ivy, if you come up here in the fall, when the leaves are changing, poison ivy leaves turn bright red, so they're a lot easier to spot in the fall. And you can just get an idea how thick the canopy is. But this clearly is massively thick. Look at the size of that one. That's on the small. This large one. I mean, look at that. I couldn't even get my hand around that. So the easy part is just this. We're going to come up to this monstrosity here. And we're just going to kill it. That just killed that poison ivy vine from this point up. If you notice the way I cut it, I was cutting using the top of the blade to throw the sawdust that way, less likely to get a snoot full of it. What I like to do is come back and do a higher hit. And remove that notch. Now that doesn't make the branch any more dead. What it does, it gives me the visual when I'm driving by to say, have I killed that poison ivy yet? Oh yeah, there's a big notch taken out of it. So let's do the same here with this little guy. Trying not to damage the bark, of course. And this is where the hatchet comes in handy. Same thing, just going to cut the notch out of it. Now the dog's going to pick it up. And while he's not going to get poison ivy, I'll end up petting him and we'll come around here to the other side and do the same to this one. That one was on its last leg anyway. So here we have a little maple that's got double grapevine in it. And that's really eating up the canopy. Now this isn't necessarily a marketable tree, but whilst we're here, we're going to get the saw pinched. There we go. With those, them swinging free, much easier to spot than the holdfasts with the poison ivy vines. So I'm going to do a couple more, and then I'm going to address some concerns I'm sure you guys are already thinking about. So here's a nice double trunk poplar with this poison ivy vine most likely still alive. This one's dead, but the tree as it grew has actually grown up around the poison ivy. You can see the root ball here goes into the crotch of the double trunk and then comes back out. That's interesting. But we're going to go ahead and take this guy out. All right, so side by sides right over there. We've got a decent stand of poplar, a little bit of maple in here as well. So a lot of vines. I'm just going to go through, put you guys on time lapse for a second. I'm going to go through and just see how many I can do here in this little segment. All right, so in this small area, in that time, 20 different vines, grape and poison ivy. There was one poplar over here that had 4 poison ivy vines on it. Now, when I was a kid, we used to cut these vines and we'd swing on them, not the poison ivy vines, but the grapevines, and swing on them, which was really fun. And you just got to remember that every weekend when you're off from school, and you want to go swing on the grapevine that you cut down a couple of weeks ago, you got to keep in mind that that grapevine, as it gets more and more brittle, it tends to not hold your weight as much. So there's many times we've been chucked over the hill because we didn't realize how old our grapevine was. Let's help our poor vine-beaten poplar here. That is a massive grapevine. All right, so let's address some of the concerns that you guys may be thinking about. First and foremost, Troy, you did not kill this grapevine, did you? No, I did not. I killed this portion of the grapevine. This portion is still alive and will thrive. Is that a problem? Yeah, to some degree, I guess, because it will start branching out and climbing the tree again. I'm not that worried about it because it will take years, dare I say decades, to get this size again to be able to affect this tree the way it has. Now, if you're into herbicides, you can obviously spray this open wound with some heavy brush herbicide like a glyphosate. I believe they even now make these plugs that you could drill and then stick the plug in, and it's a slow release and will definitely kill that. I absolutely don't use herbicides. I haven't used herbicides in decades. I just don't like them. But I'm not killing this vine. I am just killing what's doing damage to the canopy of the tree. Let's get this big boy off this hickory here. That thing is gargantuan. So let's talk about another concern. You may be asking, well, Troy, shouldn't you just try to pull this down, jerk this out of the tree maybe, even hook your tractor up to it to get it out of there so it doesn't choke the canopy? Well, if we did that, especially on a grapevine this size, we'd probably do more damage to the tree versus just leaving it. This is dying, so it will become more and more brittle, and it'll eventually just give up the ghost and will fall at one point, maybe during a windstorm. It will fall down and land on the canopy floor. Thus transitioning to my next major concern. Now that we've done 25 vines since we started this video, this little section, this 100-yard area here, now has the potential for a lot of widowmakers over the next several years. It could take years for this thing to release, and especially if a section of the vine gets hung in a crotch, it could hang there for a long time. I've got one down near the sawmill station that I cut 5 years ago. And it's brittle. I can reach up and break it off, but it's still hanging from the tree. So you have to remember that if you like to walk through the woods, especially on a windy day, may want to wear a hard hat, because if you've done a lot of this vine work around here, then potential for those things to obviously fall out of the sky and crack you in the noggin. So Timber and I are going to walk out to this bench a little bit. This is, again, where, as I mentioned, this is where I've got a lot of good marketable timber, some poplar, some oak, some maple, and I just want to clean up as much as I can. And I'll switch to time lapse. You guys can watch me do a little bit of it. And I'll catch you here in a bit. You can see this small walnut here was uprooted, most likely due to a grapevine. I had to cut it out of my road. But you can see here's the top. Look at all that twisted grapevine. One could argue that these vines, like this poison ivy vine, is not much younger than this poplar tree it's growing on. This thing is massive. I couldn't get my hand all the way around it. This poplar tree is probably about 16 inches in diameter, which again, depending on how it competed in the forest, could be 30, 40, 50 years old. Let me show you a cross section of this vine that I cut out. I'm going to try to count rings without touching it. So here's the core. Really? Come on, man. Go. So here's the core. Here's the core. Would you stop? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36. So that alone, 36 rings. Poison ivy is deciduous, so that should signify a year. So yeah, that poison ivy branch most likely is around 30-some years old. Dude, you make it tough to do close-ups. All right, so in the course of 1.5 to 2 hours of shooting this video, I've probably cut just under 100 vines total, I'd say. So am I assuming that I've now protected 100 trees from an early death? Not really, but I've reduced the chances of them getting broken off by wind by a considerable amount, I believe. You know, managing your woodlot is really based upon the time you put into it. The more you manage it, the better it's going to yield. But it all just comes back to the labor you want to put into it. Now, some of you may be questioning habitat. Troy, am I destroying habitat? Well, with any disturbance, it's just that. It is a disturbance. So as those grapevines particularly, and even poison ivy berries to some degree, as they die, of course, that's less berries for small birds to forage and squirrels and those things. But there is a multitude of habitat that has remained untouched by me, even if I would spend the next 10 years walking around trying to do this on my property. All a squirrel or bird would have to do is A, go to another option, or B, hop over the ridge to my neighbors. So I'm not really worried about disturbing the habitat too much. I know grouse, and of course I don't have a lot of grouse anymore because of the coyote But when I was a kid, the grouse, you'd find the grouse sometimes up in the treetops. They loved the little grape berries that would form on top of the grapevine, but really don't have that much of an issue anymore. Well, I think Timber and I are going to walk further out this point, have a casual stroll, maybe enjoy a pipe, and just enjoy the rest of the evening before dark. Well, as I always say, I pray you take the opportunity to get outside in God's beautiful creation. We'll see you next time.